Hi guys, Jackie from Famish Farm. Welcome to Northwest Alabama, where it's going to be mid 60s today. So, this is a beautiful day to finish up, or at least try to finish up, our fence project. This is a decorative woven hurdle type fencing, very rustic looking, that I made when we took down the trees that I'm standing right beside now. Those at one time extended all the way to the back fence, but most of those were dead, so we took them down in October. And since that time, we've been storing them, saving out the relatively straighter branches of the appropriate size to make a woven type project. I am absolutely in love with willow wattle fencing. Unfortunately, don't have access to willows, so the next best thing is the trees that you're taking down in your yard. Today, I am going to start the day by putting up a string that actually we put up when we moved the rain barrels that are now in front of me there. We moved them to the back of the house. I had strung a line to see exactly where I wanted those barrels to go, but the lines come down. So I'm going to try to square it up where we can get square to the house, obviously, but the tree is multi-trunked and really no good way to get a square reading there. So we're just going to eyeball it as good as we can. And once we have that line secure, then we can proceed. Now, the fence panels were pretty inexpensive to make. Each one required two 2x2x8 pressure treated pieces of lumber. That's about $10. A 1 pound box of screws is about $9 or $10. That will make about 8 panels. And then in my case, I'm going to make a little fence path for these 2x2 panels to sit on. And those little paver blocks were about 68 cents each, and I needed roughly 32 feet. That was another $35. Once the string is up, I am going to remove this wiring for the dish that we have never used and just kind of tuck that in behind the rain barrels. The next step is to lay the pathway of paver blocks over to the tree from the house. And I've decided I'm just going to work in a 4-foot section. This land is sloped. So for each of the 4 feet, I'm having to excavate about an inch of dirt at the house side. And so each of these panels is going to be kind of stepped. So the first one will be higher, the next one will be about an inch lower. This is kind of a fiddly bit of thing to do, but honestly, it's very satisfying to have that level finally sit on the blocks perfectly. Once that happens, I do the test fit, and I think I've gone 1 block too many, so end up pulling one of those out. Now I'm going to be attaching the fence panels directly to the brick house, so I'm using Tapcon screws, and then I'm going to make it more rigid by using a 4-foot T-post. Now, I'll be honest, the first 4-foot T-post that I put in was not right, and I had to pull it out, which was a pain in the butt. So here I finally got the right location, and we're going to get this T-post so I can actually screw directly through the holes in the T-post into my fence panel. Rod is working on projects today, so he'll kind of be in and out of the frame helping. He did help screw on the other side of the panel while I was behind there. Hidden, he was doing the screws on the other side. Once we have all those screws into the mortar, then I have fixed them directly to the panel. I'm just using little L brackets for that. And then I've already made my line kind of wonky, so I'm going to adjust it here. It's not very tall, so it catches on the grass. If I had to do it again, I would figure out a way to make much taller stakes to make the line easier to read. And there's a close-up of the first panel done. So you may be wondering why I'm making a pathway for this little fence project. We have clay soil, and when the soil gets wet, it stays wet. And I'm kind of worried about these fence panels rotting out. These are portable, and so at some point, I hope to move these from the side of the house here back to the garden. So I would like them to last. So I'm just hoping by getting them up out of the soil, they'll last for a bit longer than if they were sitting directly in the ground. Another thing is that by having this concrete paver block, I'm hoping that as hubby is using the string trimmer back here against the fence panel, he'll hit that instead of my fence. Fingers crossed. I forgot to say that I'm running this at 4 times speed because I just want you to see the whole process. And it's not just a one and done, at least it wasn't for me. I had to put these down and then take them up at least 3 times on each of the panels, even when the slope wasn't a full inch, when it was maybe only a half an inch, it still required a lot of extra fitting to make them level. And you can see that string, that is pretty important because it does keep you going on an even keel all the way down to the tree in my case. So definitely use a string if you're doing something like this. Now, in your case, though, you may not be as worried about it as I am, or you may decide just to hang them from a T post or some other type of post that you might be thinking about doing. But here's the second hurdle going into place. And I'm going to get to the point where I don't want to call Rod every time I need a hand. So I'm going to use my hand cart as an extra pair of hands to get some of these panels fitted. Which, if you've ever used a 6 by 6 fence panel or an 8 by 6 fence panel, you know how heavy those things are. So, what a joy it is just to have this little lightweight hurdle type fence panel to work with. Here I am kind of neatening up some of the edges. So, I just kept my lopper things close by in case I wanted to do any trimming. And that turned out to be a good idea because these green stakes need to be flush up against the wood. And that also means then that you can't have a block underneath the right side of each of the panels. So there's a gap between each 4 foot section of the paver pathway. And wouldn't it be a great idea to put a fence level on each of these T-post pounder things? That'd be very handy when you're putting this in. I mostly use the 2.5 inch exterior screws that I use to make the panels, but in a couple places I did need 3 inch screws. And those screws are like I'm doing here. I'm doing it panel to panel from where the branches are. Or if you can reach, if you use the green T post, there's holes, I think, every 6 inches up a green T post you can do directly into the panel that that post sits in front of. And if you run it at an angle, which I'm doing here, you can run it to the next fence panel. So you'll get plenty of rigidity from those screws. Each side of the fence panel gets about 3 screws. And before it's lunchtime, we'd put up one more panel. When we got back from lunch, it was time to work on our gate design. We have 2 3 foot panels that I decided to use for gates, and that will be enough room that Rod can run the mower in and out of. And I found these brackets, and these are, I don't know what they're called. I'll flash a picture of them up where I found them on the Home Depot website. But I actually had these little straps from my craft show days, so I'm reusing those. They're really inexpensive though if you need to get them. Here I'm testing out if my idea is going to work, making the T post work as part of the gate hinge. And it looks like it's going to do it. I'm just going to attach these with a washer and a screw. And if you're like us, another possibility would be to use some metal strapping. I'll throw a picture of that up on the screen too. The gate hardware, the hinge hardware, like a strap hinge, those are about $5 each, which is not a great deal of money. But again, I'm trying to reuse what I already have and keep the project cost as low as I can. But I did have in my shopping cart some black gate strap hinges, like 4-inch gate strap hinges that would have looked really nice too. So this part is going to take the brain power of both Rod and Jackie to figure out. We just want to make sure that we're not making any huge missteps. So I'm just in my mind trying to figure out how this is going to work. So this particular fence panel, or T-post rather, we're going to pound into the ground and then we're going to slide the gate over it. Once the gate is in place and the hinges work freely, then we will take some screws, like 3 screws, and attach them to the fence panel that's to the right now. So the fence panel to the left is the gate. There you can see it swinging. The one to the right is the rigid panel. And here we go. We're just going to try to move that without breaking anything. And then we'll get this particular panel pounded in. The pounding all went smoothly today. No big rocks, no tree roots. So that was a piece of cake. Here, Rod is going to slide our gate onto the T-post. We will make sure that it's relatively straight when it's into place, and then open up the gate. And at the back of that gate T-post, we're going to drive 3 screws into that fence panel. There is a gap there, but I think the 2.5-inch screws worked just fine there too. We'll double check the level. We look pretty good. And so now it's on to the next part of the gate. And guys, I can't believe this seems to be working. The panels and the gate seem to be holding just fine. And look at it, does open and close. So this is going to be a successful little project of making do with what we have. So now we're working on the second gate, and we're just going to reverse the process that we just did. I've marked here with the level where I need to pound. Rod will give us a hand getting that on there. And then making sure we're pretty straight. There we go. We kind of doubled and triple checked this one because we couldn't remember if the flat end went against the gate or the flat end goes against the fence. So I'll clarify that for you guys with another picture just to make sure we were doing the right thing. Here is our gate being slipped over this post. And this is the first part of the project that we're just going to have to redo a little bit because I forget with the slope going down. Now, this top hanger is not going to fit on the T-post. So I'm going to have to take this off, which is undo 2 screws, and I move it down about 4 to 6 inches. I'm just trying to look for a spot where I can work around the wood that's up against the frame. And once I find that, just zip a couple screws in and we can get on with the next panel. Now, a thing I did order was 2, I think they were $12, $13 fence post pieces of hardware that go into the post, drops down into the ground. I don't know what those are called exactly, but I'll put one on each side so that when you open the gate, you can drop that post into the ground and it will hold the gate open at whatever point that you've opened it to. And those will come in super handy because they can serve as a kind of a latch at the bottom of the gate. Thinking dog pushing through, dog wouldn't be able to push through. And then I can have a simple little hook and eye type closure for the top of the gate. We're about done for the day here. We have two more panels after this one to go up, and that's the same process. Make the little pathway for the fence panels, put up the green T-post, and then screw in the fence panels. And that gets us to within about 2 feet of the tree. Now, I didn't make the last fence panel because I wanted to measure exactly how big it would need to be once the panels were in place. So I will be making that in the next week or so. And by that time, the extra gate hardware should be received. I ordered that from Home Depot. It's not an in stock item though. So that should be here shortly. Here's how the finished product looks with all of our crap cleaned up. You can see the Tapcon screw into the mortar on the brick house, our paver pathway for the fence panels, and then our green T-post. And here's the view out toward the tree. You can see all 8 panels as we make the span here. Very happy with how it turned out. I, again, really like the rustic look. I do wish that I was able to make these a little tighter, but I couldn't because in some cases these are just too thick of branches or that the uprights are too thin, not sure which, but there's enough coverage that it's going to keep the 10-pound dog in the backyard. And luckily, she's not a digger. So even if we leave the gate without any type of gap, she has never dug out of anything. So let's hope she doesn't decide to start digging. And if she does, we'll just put some chicken wire down below to keep her in. And that brings us to the end of this project. Pretty happy with how it turned out and looking forward to figuring out what to do with the next trees that will come down maybe in April.